In the summer of 1849, the sun burned hot over the hills of California. Dust covered the land and the rivers ran low. Men with dirty hands and wild dreams came here to dig for gold. Among them was Thomas Hale, a quiet man with a tired face and a strong back. He had no family, no friends, and no luck, but he still believed he would strike gold one day. Thomas worked alone in a dry canyon. Far from the other miners, he believed that the best gold was buried deep where no one else had looked. Day after day, he dug, breaking rocks and swinging his pickaxe. His hands were rough, his clothes torn, and his food almost gone. Still, he kept digging on a quiet morning. The ground felt strange beneath his boots. He noticed a smooth black stone buried under the dirt. It was cold to touch, even in the sun. Curious. Thomas took his pickaxe and hit it hard. The ground shook, and a loud crack echoed through the canyon. A thin line of blue light escaped from the rock. Then the earth collapsed, and Thomas fell into a hole. He coughed as dust filled the air. When it cleared, he realized he had fallen into a hidden chamber. The walls were smooth and covered with strange glowing marks. Blue crystals lit the space like stars in the night sky. In the center of the chamber was a stone platform, and floating just above it was a woman. She didn't breathe, didn't move, but she looked alive. Her skin was pale silver, soft and shining. Like moonlight, her hair flowed in the air like water. She wore strange metal bands on her arms and neck. She looked both beautiful and dangerous. Thomas stared, frozen in place. He had never seen anything like this before. He stepped closer, heart beating fast. He reached out his hand to touch her. Before he could, her eyes opened. They were glowing white, without pupils. She looked directly at him and whispered his name. "Thomas," she said in a soft, broken voice. He jumped back, nearly tripping over the broken stone. "How do you know my name?" he asked, afraid and confused. She blinked slowly, then whispered one more word: "Free." The chamber shook again, and the blue crystals flashed bright. The metal bands on her arms snapped and fell. She dropped gently to the ground, breathing. Slowly, Thomas didn't know if he should run or help her. She took one step forward and fell to her knees. Thomas rushed to catch her, surprised at how light she was. Her body was cold but soft, like snow on bare skin. He wrapped his coat around her and looked around. The glowing symbols on the walls began to fade. Whatever magic had kept her asleep was now gone. He didn't understand anything, but he knew one thing. He couldn't leave her here. Thomas lifted her up and carried her out of the chamber. The sun outside burned his eyes after the soft blue glow. He looked down at her face, and for a moment, she looked peaceful. Like she had waited a long time for someone to find her. Back at his cabin, he laid her on his bed. He gave her water and waited, watching her every breath. After some time, her fingers moved, then her lips. She opened her eyes again and whispered, "Where am I?" "You're safe," Thomas said. "Not sure if it was true. You were trapped in that chamber." "I don't know what it was." She looked around, confused and weak. "You are human," she said softly. He nodded. "And you're not." She tried to sit up, but winced in pain. "I am." "Valari," she said. "I was a guardian, long ago. Until they betrayed me." "Who betrayed you?" he asked. She didn't answer, just stared at the window. "They will come now." "They always come when I wake." Thomas didn't understand. But fear crawled into his chest. He looked outside, where the trees swayed in the hot wind. Everything seemed normal, but he felt something had changed. Something deep beneath the earth had opened, and something else might be watching, waiting. The pickaxe he used to search for gold had done more than break rock. It had broken time, broken silence, broken the seal. He hadn't found gold. He had found a secret, a powerful one, and now he wasn't alone anymore. The cabin was quiet, but Thomas couldn't sleep. He sat on a wooden chair near the fire, staring at the strange woman lying on his bed. Her silver skin shimmered softly in the firelight. She had not moved in hours. But she breathed slowly and deeply. Her name was Valari, and she was not human. Thomas kept hearing her voice in his head, not speaking, but echoing, like a dream that wouldn't go away. She had said something about guardians and betrayal. And something worse, they will come now. The words chilled him more than the wind outside. By morning, Valari opened her eyes again. She sat up slowly, touching her head, as if it hurt to remember. Thomas offered her water, and she took it. Without fear, I dreamed of fire, she whispered, and silence. And you? Me. Thomas asked, surprised. She nodded. For years, I slept in darkness, trapped under the ground, but I saw you in my dreams. A human man with a strong heart. Thomas looked away, unsure how to answer. He had never been called special before. Valari stood up carefully and looked around the small room. She touched the wall like it was a living thing. This place is old, she said, but your people are new. Thomas sat back down and rubbed his hands. What are you? He asked. What were you doing buried in that chamber? Valari took a deep breath and looked at him. I am what your people would call a guardian. My kind were protectors, watchers of life across stars. She raised her hand. And for a moment, small sparks danced on her palm. Energy shimmered in the air, soft and silent, but long ago. We were betrayed by those who fed on destruction. They feared our power, so they trapped us in deep prisons. Thomas frowned. So, why were you in California? Valari gave a faint smile. Earth was young then. We chose this place for its quiet heart, but time forgot us, and the ground covered everything. Thomas stood up and walked to the window. The sun was rising, but something in the air felt cold. Do others know you're here now? He asked. Valari didn't answer at first, then said, they will feel my awakening. They always do. Suddenly, the floor of the cabin creaked, though no one stepped on it. Thomas grabbed his old rifle from the wall. Valari raised a hand, calming him. No enemy is here yet, she said, but the wind carries their scent. Outside, birds stopped singing, and a strange buzzing sound filled the forest. Valari closed her eyes and focused. This planet has changed much, but the stars remember. Thomas looked confused. You talk like the earth is alive? She turned to him, serious. It is. And now, it's watching us both. Later that day, Valari walked into the forest with Thomas by her side. She moved slowly, like someone walking through memories. They found a rock near a stream where she sat and closed her eyes. Thomas watched her in silence, unsure of what she was doing. Minutes passed, and then she whispered, I see your past. Pain, hunger, hope. Thomas looked shocked. You're reading my thoughts? No, she replied. Only what your heart has already spoken. He sat beside her, unsure what to feel. She continued, you are alone, Thomas Hale, but your soul carries fire, not for gold, but for meaning. He looked away, hiding the sudden sting in his eyes. No one ever said that to me. He muttered. Valari smiled gently. Now someone has. That night, back at the cabin, Valari drew symbols in the dirt near the fireplace. Glowing lines formed patterns Thomas couldn't understand. What is that? He asked. A star map, she replied. A warning system. If they are near, it will light up. Thomas stared at the glowing shapes, amazed. He had come to these hills hoping for gold. Now he had a glowing map. It's a silver-skinned woman from the stars, and a warning of enemies he hadn't seen yet. Before sleeping, Valari touched his hand. I will teach you more, if you want to learn. Thomas nodded slowly. I do, but I don't want to get killed doing it. She smiled faintly. Then we must be careful. Together, as Thomas lay. In bed, the firelight flickered across the walls. Valari sat near the window, watching the sky. She whispered in her own language, soft, like a song. The wind carried her words out into the dark forest. And far away, something old and cold began to stir. The stars above the forest looked quiet, but something was wrong. Thomas stood outside the cabin with his arms crossed. Once in the sky, it was almost midnight, and the wind had stopped. No birds, no bugs, no sound, only silence. Thick and heavy, Valari stepped beside him, her eyes glowing faintly. "They are coming closer," she whispered. Thomas looked at her face, then back at the stars. "What will they do if they find you?" He asked. "They won't ask questions," she said. "They destroy what they fear." Suddenly, a blue flash lit up the sky. It was fast, like lightning, but it made no sound. Then came another one, this time green. Valari stared at the lights, and her voice turned sharp. "They are scanning the land." Thomas tightened his grip on the old rifle in his hand. "It won't help against them," Valari said softly. "I know," Thomas replied. "But it makes me feel better." They both stood still, staring up as a strange triangle-shaped craft passed silently above the trees. Its body was dark, blending into the sky. Only the lights gave it away, blinking like eyes in the dark. The craft disappeared over the mountain, and the night returned to silence. Valari turned to Thomas. "We must hide the chamber. If they find it, they will know I'm awake by sunrise." The two were back in the canyon. Thomas dug with his shovel while Valari used her hands. Her fingers glowed slightly as she moved stones like they weighed nothing. Together, they collapsed the chamber. Entrance with rock and dirt. When it was done, Valari placed her palm over the soil. A soft hum filled the air, and the rocks began to glow briefly. "They will sense only broken stone now," she said. Thomas stared at her, wondering again how someone so gentle-looking could hold such strange power. That day, the miners in the nearby hills started to talk. One man claimed he saw a shadow flying over the river. Another said he heard voices whispering in a language no man should understand. A third said the water in his pan turned to ice, just for a moment, then back to liquid. Fear grew fast among them. "Demons," someone whispered. "Spirits," another said, but Thomas knew better. They were looking for Valari, back at the cabin. Thomas and Valari made a plan. "We can't fight them," he said. "Not with old rifles and bare hands." "No," Valari agreed, "but there are ways to slow them down." She opened her hand and revealed a small crystal. It glowed red and pulsed like a heartbeat. "This is a beacon disruptor, if placed in the right place. It will confuse their senses for a while." Thomas took it carefully, feeling a strange heat in his palm. "Where do I put it?" "The tallest tree on the highest hill," she said. "Tonight, that night." Thomas climbed the hill alone. The trees were tall and black against the sky. He tied the crystal to a branch and stepped back. It glowed brighter, and for a second, everything around it fell into silence. The wind stopped. Then the glow faded into a low pulse. Almost invisible, as he climbed down, he saw something moving in the trees. It wasn't a bear, and it wasn't a man. It was tall, thin, and dead. Silver, with no face, just a smooth mask. Its body shimmered like heat on metal. Thomas held his breath and didn't move. The creature turned its head slightly, sniffing the air. Then it walked away into the forest, disappearing without a sound. Thomas waited until he was sure it was gone, then ran back to the cabin. Valari was waiting by the fire. "You saw one," she said, without asking. "Yes," he replied, still shaking. "What are they?" "They are called the Cattell. They feed on memory and sound. They can smell fear like a wolf smells blood." Thomas sat down and looked into the fire. "I'm not sure I can do this, Valari," he said quietly. She knelt beside him and touched his shoulder. "You already are," she said. "You saw one and survived. That means something." He looked up at her and asked, "Why do they want you so badly?" She hesitated, then said, "I carry a code in my blood, a seed of power they cannot make. Only life can create it. If I die, that seed is lost forever, and if you live, then one day Earth will have the strength to resist them." Thomas stared at the fire for a long time. Then he whispered, "Then we keep you alive." Far above them, in the dark sky, the Catal ship turned silently. Its lights flashed once, then disappeared. The sky turned dark before sunset. Thick gray clouds rolled in fast, covering the sun like a blanket. The air felt heavy, and even the animals had gone quiet. Thomas stood on his porch, staring at the horizon. Valari stood beside him, her hands clenched tightly. "They're not just searching anymore," she said. "They've found something." Thunder rumbled, but there was no lightning, only a low hum, deep and steady, coming from above the clouds. Then it happened. The ship arrived. A giant black shadow tore through the sky like a falling star. It didn't burn, and it didn't roar. It just glided silently, heavy as a mountain. Then it crashed into the forest beyond the ridge with a sound like the earth itself groaning. Trees snapped, birds flew out in fear, and the ground trembled. Thomas fell to one knee. Trying to keep balance, Valari stayed standing, her eyes glowing brighter. "They've landed," she whispered. "Not scouts, not spies, soldiers." Thomas looked at her, fear in his chest. "What do we do?" "We run," she said. "We move to the old chamber. There are weapons there. Old but powerful, they packed quickly, taking only what they needed: food, water, a blanket, and the star map Valari had drawn." Thomas grabbed his rifle, even if it was useless. Valari didn't argue this time. As they moved through the forest, they heard strange sounds, not like animals, more like machines breathing. Metal scraping, something sniffing the trees. Once, Thomas turned his head and saw something tall and thin walking just behind the trees, but when he blinked, it was gone. At sunset, they reached the collapsed canyon. Valari placed her hand on the rocks and closed her eyes. A blue light circled her fingers, and the stone moved slowly, silently. The hidden chamber opened again, now darker and colder than before. Inside, they moved fast, deeper into a side tunnel Thomas hadn't seen before. The air grew colder, and the walls glowed faintly. Symbols danced on the stone like soft flames. At the end of the tunnel was a large stone table covered in dust. On it lay a strange device, shaped like a staff with two ends, one glowing white, one black. "This is called a soul fork," Valari said. "It holds both life and death, light and shadow, but it needs energy to work. Living energy." She looked at Thomas carefully. "I need your help," she said. "Not just your body, your will." He stepped closer, staring at the alien weapon. "What happens if I give it my energy?" "You may feel pain. Your body might weaken," she said softly, "but your mind will stay strong. You'll become the key to this weapon's power." Thomas took a deep breath and nodded. "I didn't dig you out just to let them take you." Again, he reached out and touched the soul fork. A sharp flash of light filled the room, and his body shook like lightning had struck his bones. He screamed but didn't pull away. Valari held his hand the whole time, whispering something in her language. The energy flowed from him into the weapon. His skin turned pale, his arms trembled, and his heart beat like thunder. Finally, the weapon stopped glowing and turned calm. It now pulsed like a living thing. The room grew still. Thomas fell to his knees, gasping for air. Valari knelt beside him, placing a hand on his chest. "You're still alive," she said gently, "and stronger than I thought." Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the chamber. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the ground shook again. "They're here," Valari said, rising to her feet. "They've found the chamber." She picked up the soul fork and turned to Thomas. "I will fight. But I cannot hold them alone." Thomas stood slowly, still weak, but breathing. "I'll be right beside you," he said. "I didn't come all this way to quit now." As they walked back up the tunnel, the air grew hotter. A red light flashed outside the entrance, and the smell of burned wood filled their noses. They stepped out into the open canyon. The sky was on fire. Above them, the enemy ship hovered low. Its body cracked open like a wounded beast, and from it, creatures were dropping tall, thin, silver-skinned horrors with long arms and glowing claws. Valari stepped forward, raising the soul fork. Thomas stood behind her, watching the shadows move toward them. His fear was real, but something inside him felt calm. The weapon had changed something in him. He was no longer just a miner. He was now a guardian too. As the creatures ran toward them with hissing sounds, Valari spoke one last word. "Now." The canyon lit up with blue fire, and the battle began. The mountain roared with fire and light. Valari stood like a shining statue, holding the soul fork with both hands. Beside her, Thomas breathed hard, sweat running down his face. His legs shook, but he stood firm. They were not alone anymore. The Catal had arrived. The silver creatures moved like smoke and shadow. Their claws glowed red, and their bodies flickered in and out of shape. They didn't speak, didn't roar. They just came forward, fast and silent, like death in the wind. Valari raised the soul fork, and a wave of blue energy blasted from it. 3 of the creatures burned in place, turning into dust, but 5 more replaced them, climbing over rocks like spiders. Thomas picked up a long stick burning at one end and swung it at one of them. It didn't hurt the creature, but it slowed it down. That was enough. Valari turned and blasted it to ash. "Keep them away from me," she shouted. "I need to focus the weapons core." Thomas nodded and stood in front of her, guarding her with nothing but fire and fists. Each time he swung, his body screamed in pain. But he didn't stop. The soul fork had changed him, not just his body, but something inside, behind them. The ship groaned again. More creatures dropped down, landing hard and fast. The earth cracked under their feet, and red mist spread across the canyon. Valari closed her eyes and raised the soul fork high. Blue light shot into the sky, forming a dome over the canyon. The creatures hissed and shrieked. Hitting the barrier, they couldn't pass through, but the shield wouldn't last long. Thomas stumbled back, coughing. His skin had turned pale, and his breath came slow. Valari caught him, holding him upright. "The weapon is draining you too fast," she said. "You'll die if we keep going like this." Thomas gave a weak smile. "Then, let's make it worth it." She helped him lie down behind a stone wall, then turned to face the shield and closed her eyes. "I must link with the mountain," she whispered. "It will give me the power to end this, but only if I become part of it." "What does that mean?" Thomas asked. "It means I may never leave," she said softly. "I will become the guardian again." Locked away like before, Thomas sat up, pain in every bone. "No," he said. "There has to be another way." Valari looked at him with gentle eyes. "Sometimes the only way to protect life is to leave it." Suddenly, the shield cracked. The largest Catal stepped forward. Taller than the others, its arms split into 6 long blades, and its head glowed like fire. Valari's eyes widened. "That's a Wraith Commander," she said. "Even I can't face it alone." Thomas looked at her, then at the soul fork. His hands trembled, but he stood up. "You won't face it alone," he said. "Let me hold the weapon." Just for a moment, Valari hesitated, then nodded. She placed the soul fork in his hands and wrapped her arms around him. "Let me give you my strength," she whispered. Their eyes met, and the soul fork began to glow white, not blue, not red, pure light. It pulsed with both their energies, human and alien, together. They walked forward to meet the commander. The Catal Wraith charged, its blades slashing through air. Thomas stepped forward and struck the ground with the soul fork, a shockwave. Blasted outward, tossing the smaller creatures like leaves. The commander was hit, but it kept coming. Its body burned but didn't break. Valari stepped beside Thomas, her hands glowing with raw power. "Now," she said, "strike again, with me, together." They raised the weapon and brought it down. A massive beam of light shot into the commander. It screamed for the first time, a sound like broken glass and thunder. Then it shattered into sparks and vanished. Silence filled the canyon. The red mist faded. The enemy ship shook violently, then rose into the air. It turned and flew away, fast and broken. The mountain was quiet again, but Thomas collapsed. The soul fork falling from his hands. His body was cold and his eyes half closed. Valari held him tightly, tears in her glowing eyes. "You did it," she whispered. "You stopped them." Thomas gave a faint smile. "Only because you stood with me," he said. Then his eyes closed. Valari touched his chest and sang softly. A song from her world, old and powerful. The stars above flickered, as if listening, and slowly. Thomas began to breathe again. The wind blew gently over the canyon. The fire in the sky was gone, and the forest was quiet again. Thomas lay on the ground, his body weak, his breath shallow. Valari knelt beside him, her silver hair falling over his chest like a soft blanket. Her hands glowed with soft light as she pressed them against his heart. "Don't go," she whispered. "Not yet." Inside Thomas's mind, everything was dark. But then he saw something her. Valari stood in a glowing space, reaching her hand toward him. He walked to her, confused. "Where are we?" he asked. "This is the place between life and death," she said softly. "You gave everything to protect me. To protect Earth, I couldn't let them win," he said. "And now? You must choose." Valari said, "If you return, you will not be the same." Thomas looked down and saw his own body fading like mist. "What happens if I stay? Then your body will die, but your spirit will live with me forever in the stars." He looked into her glowing eyes, then smiled and said, "Let's go back first. One more fight." Valari touched his chest, and light burst through them. Both back in the canyon, his body arched with energy. He gasped loudly, his eyes flying open. Valari cried out in relief, holding him close. "You chose life," she said. Thomas nodded weakly. "I'm not done yet," but something had changed. A mark now glowed on Thomas's Nikan alien symbol, like a star wrapped in a circle. "What is this?" he asked, touching it. "Our bond," Valari said. "We are now linked, blood and light, mind and soul." "What does that mean?" "It means you carry a part of me, and I carry a part of you." Thomas stood slowly, still tired, but stronger than before. He felt something strange in his body, like hidden strength waiting to wake up. Valari looked at the soul fork, lying on the stone floor. It no longer glowed, had given all it could. "They'll be back," Thomas said. Valari nodded. "Yes, and stronger next time. But now we're connected," he added. "And I feel like I can do more than just dig for gold." That night, they returned to the cabin. The forest was calm, but the wind carried a warning. Valari drew symbols on the walls, old signs of protection from her people. Thomas helped her, not knowing the meaning, but trusting her hands while they worked. She told him stories of the stars, of cities floating in space, of battles won and worlds lost, of the day she was betrayed by her own kind and sealed in Earth's soil. "Why did they betray you?" Thomas asked. Valari paused. Because I chose to protect life, not power, she said. They feared my heart more than my weapon. Thomas looked at her. Well, they were right to fear it. You've got a heart stronger than anyone I've met. She smiled gently, and now it beats with yours. The next morning, the star map pulsed red. A new signal was coming faster and larger. Valari's face turned serious. The second wave, she said. They bring machines now. Not hunters, but destroyers. Thomas stepped outside and looked at the mountains. I guess we'll need more than firewood and guts this time. Valari turned toward him. We have something greater now. She held out her hand, and Thomas took it. Their bond glowed between them like a thread of light. She placed her hand on his chest. I can awaken your gift, she said, but once done, you cannot go back to who you were. He didn't hesitate. I'm not that man anymore. Valari closed her eyes, and light flowed into Thomas's chest. He cried out, not in pain, but in power. His veins lit up like glowing rivers. He fell to the ground, shaking as the energy filled every part of him. When it was over, he opened his eyes. They now glowed faintly, like hers. What did you do to me? He asked, half amazed, half afraid. I helped you become what Earth needed, Valari said. You are now something new, not just human, but a bridge between stars and soil. Thomas looked at his hands, feeling energy pulse through them. I don't know what I am. You are Thomas Hale, she said, the one who woke me, and the one who now walks beside me. He nodded slowly. Then let's get ready, above them. The clouds began to swirl, and from the sky, a new shadow fell. Not sleek and fast like the last ship, but large, wide, and heavy a war engine. Valari and Thomas watched together, side by side, no longer two beings from different worlds, but one force born of bond, blood, and light. The earth shook before dawn. The mountain groaned like it was alive above the clouds. A massive dark shape hovered silently the war engine. It was larger than any ship Thomas had seen in Valari's star map, black like coal, wide like a village. And humming with power, Valari stood outside the cabin, her silver eyes glowing. Beside her, Thomas breathed slowly, the mark on his neck pulsing with light. Their bond had grown stronger overnight. Now, their thoughts were connected. They didn't need to speak. They understood each other through feeling. The destroyers have arrived, Valari whispered in his mind. Thomas looked up at the ship. They don't want you alive, do they? No, she answered. They want to erase all memory of me. And now, you too. The war engine opened beneath its belly. Dozens of machines dropped, like metal wolves with legs of blades. They had no eyes. No mouths, just sharp parts and glowing red cores. They moved fast, slicing through trees, crushing stones under metal feet. Valari raised her hands and created a shield of blue light. It surrounded the cabin and the edge of the forest. But it would not last long. These are warforged. She said, no life, no soul, just death. Thomas stepped forward, his body glowing with the power she had given him. He no longer needed a rifle. His hands sparked with energy, and his breath glowed in the cold air. He was still human, but something more, a warrior born from light and pain. We can't defend forever, he said. Valari nodded. We must strike at the core of the war engine. But how do we reach it? She looked at him. We don't need to reach it. We need to bring it down. She handed him a glowing sphere, the last core spark of her people. If placed at the mountain's peak and activated with your energy, it will release a wave strong enough to destroy the ship. Thomas looked. Up at the mountain above them, it was steep, cold, and filled with falling rocks and broken paths. And now, crawling with metal beasts. I'll do it, he said. I'll climb it. I'm coming too. Valari said, no, he replied. If you fall, they win. But if I fall, you'll still live. And Earth still has a chance. she stared. At him, her face full of emotion. Then slowly, she stepped back. "But I'll guide you with my mind," she said softly, "and I'll be with you. Always." Thomas turned and ran into the forest. Behind him, Valari faced the oncoming machines. She raised her arms, and blue fire shot into the trees. Creatures exploded. Sparks flying like stars in the night. But there were too many, and every second, more fell from the sky. Up the mountain, Thomas climbed fast. His feet bled, his breath burned. But he kept going. The war engine rumbled above, moving lower. It was preparing its final weapons, something that could wipe out the entire valley. "You must hurry," Valari's voice whispered in his mind. "I'm trying," he replied, pushing past rocks and heat. Suddenly, one of the war-forged creatures leaped at him from the trees. Thomas raised his hand and blasted it with pure energy. The metal beast melted. Sliding down the rocks like hot wax, near the peak, the wind screamed, and fire rained from the sky. Thomas reached the top. Shaking, tired, almost broken, he placed the sphere on the flat stone, the highest point. "Now," Valari said, "give it your life spark." Thomas closed his eyes. He focused on his pain, his fear, his hope. He thought about Valari, about Earth, about every dream he ever had. Then he placed his hand on the sphere and let go. The sky exploded with white light. The mountain glowed like a sun had been born from inside it. The war engine shook, screamed, cracked, and then fell. It dropped into the forest with a sound like the world was ending. Fire, smoke, and metal rained down like a storm. And then silence. Valari fell to her knees, her shield fading. The machines stopped moving. Their red lights dead. The war was over. But Thomas didn't return. His body was never found. Only the mark he carried remained. Glowing faintly in the mountain stone, years passed. The miners told stories of the man who walked with a star goddess. They said he climbed the mountain and became part of it. Some called him a spirit, others a god. The children whispered about glowing eyes in the forest at night. And if you listened closely at the mountain's peak, you could still hear too. Voices soft and strong talking like old friends. They called him the Mountain Guardian, the man who gave up gold to save the world, the one who dug for treasure and found a goddess.